Welcome to Intrinsic Motivation from a Homie's Perspective podcast, where we meet experts from all walks of life to learn their intrinsic motivation so that they can share it with the world. What do we have in store today? Stay tuned to find out more. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody out there in podcast land. This is another episode of Intrinsic Motivation from a Homie's Perspective. This is Hamza.
And I am David.
And I am glad, and David and I always talk about that there's no accidents. And so our guest today actually has a book that she had written called Why I'm Glad the Gun Jammed. And if that isn't inflammatory enough, before we do get started, I do want to have a great rest in peace to Vern Troyer. And for those that don't know Vern Troyer, he's the guy better known as Mini-Me from Austin Powers. And, big celebrity, and he actually had succumbed to depression yesterday. And we're going to cover a little bit about Jeanne's story with that Dr. Jeanne Sanner, who's going to talk about her book, Why I'm Glad the Gun Jammed, and many other interesting things that I think that the audience will enjoy. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Jeanne Sanner.
Well, hello there from sunny California. Actually, the name of my book is Finding Unconditional Love, a Little Piece, P-E-A-C-E, at a Time. And one of the elements of that book is dealing with the period in my life where I actually did put a gun to my head and I actually did pull the trigger and the gun jammed. And so then I go forward with what happened with my life after that, and the bottom line is I am very happy, have a lot of love, a lot of peace, a lot of joy in my life, and so that's why I'm very glad the gun jammed.
I was just wondering initially before getting into that, if you're getting the book title approved seems a lot better for Finding Unconditional Love versus Why I'm Glad the Gun Jammed.
Yeah. Finding unconditional love, a little piece at a time. That's really, that sums up my journey, my life's journey. That sometimes the discovery of unconditional love or peace and joy takes a little time, and you take one step forward and two steps back, and then three steps forward, and that sort of thing. So. And I wrote the book and published it in 2011, but I never really promoted it. And just recently I revisited it and did a revised edition, and that should be coming out in May.
Oh, awesome. Perfect timing. So we'll make sure that we get the word out and help promote that book for you. So May 2018, folks, guys, be on the lookout for that. I'm sure it's going to be on Amazon and all the other major outlets.
Yes. Now, I understand, Hamza, that your sister committed suicide?
She did. For those in the world, we all have our experience of remembering where we were when 9/11 happened. And, 9/11 was huge for us here in the States. And then 7/11 happened where there was an explosion in Spain. And, there was a little bit of, at least internally with the family, of talking about the significance of 11. So we were like, what's going to happen when it's 5/11 or 8/11? And she actually transitioned on 3/11. So a month ago in 2016.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your loss. It's difficult on this side. When somebody makes that choice.
Yeah, as I was reading, I appreciate you for acknowledging that. And, it's one of those where you're always asking questions that you probably will not get answered, or you'll get different peaks and different avenues. Since this is an intrinsic motivation, David and I have experience for a couple of decades and just learning a lot about spirituality and piercing the veil and so on and so forth. So I do get some solace in my relationship with her now versus when she was in third dimension. And so it was kind of hard just even hearing about, I don't want to just keep calling him mini-me, but Vern Troyer, because it was a lot of, there's a template that doesn't really exist, but when it's over, you're always wondering because you never know what someone's going through. And on the outside, and especially in his case, since this just happened yesterday, you look at his Instagram and he's always smiling and he's the life of the party, and you never know the demons that people have to deal with when they're by themselves.
That's very true. That's very true. And the people that are left behind, if anyone is listening, I wouldn't spend a lot of time trying to figure it out because, as in my case, I, too, was always laughing, and people didn't know the pain that I was going through. And so there would be no way for them to understand where I was or how I got to that point. And normally people are not looking through the lens of suicide. So after it happens, people look back and say, oh, I should have picked that up. Oh, that was a sign that I should. And in all honesty, no, if you're not looking through that lens, you would never interpret those things from that point of view. And so, I hope that people come to realize, and if somebody gets to that point, there really isn't anything that anybody else can do. Now, if somebody is on the verge and they're thinking about it, then I really hope that my situation can give them legitimate hope that there are solutions. When you think there aren't any, you just don't see a way out of the quagmire. There just isn't any vision of light at the end of the tunnel. And I would like to let people know there really is, and you don't have to get to the end of the tunnel to find the light, because you are the light. And it's about coming to realize the truth of who you are spiritually. And so, if there's anything that I can do to help anybody through my book or through a conversation, I hope that I can.
Absolutely. One thing that was interesting, and I'd like for you to share your story, but one thing that was interesting with Vern Troyer and my sister, the parallels is that, he was 49, and my sister was in her early 40s. And so as a family member, or I can only speak for myself, so as her brother, right, from like teenage years, 20s, 30s, there was always like, hey, the sky is partly cloudy, or is it partly sunny, right? It's always perception. And so we had a podcast recently with Michael Tamora, and he was talking about near-death experiences, and we were talking about there's a school of thought of exits that we have throughout our lives. And as a family member, you're kind of, or I was used to, partly cloudy some days, partly sunny some days on her behalf. So I just kind of looked at it as, we'll be 80 years old at the beach and she's complaining about this or complaining about that. And I bring that up because just reading Vern Troyer's story, it was very similar in that it ultimately happened yesterday, but there were many instances throughout his life where he may have entertained the thought and played around with it, and then it finally happened.
Yeah, that's very true. There are things, it isn't an instantaneous decision. Things build on each other. My father was abusive, and then I was going through discovering the truth of who I am as a gay woman, and really didn't understand that in the 60s, and we didn't talk about things like that, and I was thinking that I was really sick or something. And so there's moment after moment after moment and incident after incident that builds on itself. The key is the size of the gap. What we need to look at is the size of the gap between who someone thinks they are and who they would like to be, or they think other people see them as being, or they think other people want them to be. And the larger the gap, then the greater the depth of depression. So it really is important to discover the truth of who we are. And one of the things that I love about your show is that it's dealing with who we are spiritually. And if we come to realize that we are spiritual beings and, we are whole and complete, and we are love, and we are joy, and we are peace, and we've just managed to cover all of that up with what this third dimension throws at us. And so it's a matter of washing off the mud of the third dimension and seeing the truth of who we are. And when we come to that realization, it's like, wow, I'm really a pretty cool person. And that's what I'm hoping people come to see.
Absolutely. So let's go back, if you don't mind sharing your story, and just to give it some context. It's really interesting that we're in 2018 having this conversation, but I mean, this was in the 1960s that your situation happened. So if you'd like to share your story, that'd be great.
Well, it really started with my dad. He was abusive physically and mentally, and was sexually inappropriate. In my teens, I was then struggling very hard to find a way to forgive him. It was like I was raised with the Christian philosophy, and forgiveness was very, very important, and I was trying to forgive and really couldn't. Then it's sort of like Jim Self talks to Metatron. The symbol of my spiritual mentor is Jesus, because that's where I was raised. It would be Buddha for somebody else, or Muhammad or Gandhi. And so I started having the conversation about forgiveness, and it was an interesting conversation because I was first told, well, go to the scriptures and see what I did, Jesus is saying to me. And so I did, and the interesting discovery was he never forgave. Jesus always said, your sins are forgiven, but he never said, I forgive you. And so then I was told, well, ponder that and find out why, and I realized, oh my gosh, he never condemned. So the first thing that happens if we're ever in a position to have to forgive someone is that we have to discover we are condemning them, or there would be nothing to forgive. So then I had to go through the steps of, okay, well, his behavior is worth condemning. This is unacceptable behavior, okay? So, but then I was given something that changed my perceptions. See, your whole show and what Jim was talking about is about perceptions. And so then this voice that I identify as Jesus said, well, what I said, you on the cross said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And he said, well, let me correct that. I said, okay, who am I to argue, So he said, no, what I really said was, Father, forgive them, for they know not who they are. There's a huge difference there. And so then I realized, oh, well, my dad doesn't know who he is. If he knew who he was spiritually, he wouldn't do the things that he was doing. So I was getting through that phase of forgiving my dad. What I needed to learn next, and it wasn't until after the gun jammed, is that I needed to forgive myself as well. whoever I am in this realm. And that's when I began to realize I was having sexual attraction to women, and and I was in my early 20s, and my next role in life, I had finished college, I was a teacher, I should get married. So then I found the perfect son-in-law for my mother. It really wasn't, the best partner for me. And he was wonderful. He was an absolutely wonderful man, but I did not love him intimately or romantically, and so then I was going to leave him, and we hadn't been married very long, and what I saw, bottom line, is that everywhere I went, all I did was cause pain. I felt that I had caused pain for my father, which is why he abused me. I felt that I was causing pain for Roy and for his family and for my family, and I was just the center. I was a pain magnet, and the best thing to do for everybody in the world is just to get rid of me. And that's where I was. Now, when the gun jammed, when the gun jammed, I then panicked. Okay, I'm sitting there with the gun, and it jammed, and then all of a sudden my hand is shaking, and I decided to put the gun down. And then Roy came home. He was in the military, and it was his pistol that he had put away. And he said, "Why is the pistol out?" And I made something up, like, well, I just wanted to shoot it in the backyard to see, what it was like. And he says, "Well, it's a good thing it didn't go off. They would have heard it everywhere." And I said, "Yeah, it's a good thing it didn't go off." But see, he bought it. He bought into what I said. That indicates how cleverly I had hidden all of my pain. Because had it been evident, then somebody would put together great pain, pistol, not good combination. Okay, but he didn't pick up on it.
Mm. So would you say, was that a moment where you immediately after that, you were just like, it kind of shook you and totally put you into another direction? Or was it like, I just for whatever reason it didn't happen, and I'm going to try again in a day or two?
Well, I think what happened was my spiritual side shot up to my consciousness and said, okay, how often does a military pistol jam? Now, I probably did something in putting it together. I probably did something wrong just did, what are the chances? And so then I figured, okay, I'm supposed to learn something from this. I'm supposed to grow from this. I'm supposed to do something with my life. But I wouldn't want anybody to go through what I went through in hopes that the gun would jam so that they would find out if they're supposed to do something else. I think it's important for us to come to that realization without getting to that edge and stepping off the precipice. So I just want people to know that today we have a lot more resources available for folks. There were no phone numbers you could call if you're contemplating suicide. There were no phone numbers you could call if you are exploring your sexuality and you're all confused and that sort of thing. There are resources today, and I would really, really, really encourage anyone before they make that final choice to explore some resources where you are heard, people hear where you are and what you need, and can guide you to the place of peace and joy that I experienced today. I cannot put it in words. And I know that is something everyone can come to when they choose to take a spiritual path to the truth.
Awesome.
That's a wonderful.
Yes,
Also is the title of a wonderful Zen parable.
That's why I said that. I saw that in your book, so I knew you would appreciate that. Awesome.
Oh yes, a perfect time for also. such a great Zen parable. Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, that was. I read that and your little story with it and everything, and I was like, wow, that really hit home with me. So, yeah, also, you should make some shirts that say that.
You know what? That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Oh, yeah. If anybody hasn't read it, it's also called, let's see, Also and So, I think, or something. It has a couple of different titles, but it's a wonderful little story. So
yeah, it's a great story. Yeah.
And that's why I had, started out with saying it's 2018, because it made me realize, as far as resources, that I personally took some things for granted, and it made me think back to the mid-'90s, where I have to give a shout-out to the author Elin Harris. And he has since transitioned, but he had written this book called Invisible Life. And so I was going to school here in Atlanta, and I'm originally from New Jersey, and so there's, people from all over, but Atlanta's known as the Black gay capital, right, in the country. And so we have our preconceived notions of what that may or may not be. And so we were looking primarily at stereotypes. And so with Elin Harris, he had written this book where you had the star quarterback on the football team. He had the gorgeous girl in his arm, yet he was living this double life. And, they wound up getting married. He had given her HIV. And so after he died, his wife had, she's trying to get back and put her life back together. She started asking guys, if they were gay or if they had experiences. And some guys, they were just so taken aback, they threw drinks at her and all this other stuff. Well, every girl at Spelman and all the surrounding colleges are reading that book. So all the guys are like, what are these girls reading? And it just opened the conversation to have that. And so there's more of an openness now that at least you have the conversation, as opposed to, what that fictional person went through in the story, or potentially what you went through in a different time in the 60s where you couldn't have had that open conversation.
Yeah, very true. There are a lot of resources now. There are a lot of stories to be told and that have been told that can guide people toward, well, maybe I'm not as much off the beaten path as I think I am. Maybe I'm not as strange or as sick as I think I am. So I'm hoping that, people take the time to re-examine. We give cats 9 lives. I mean, I don't know why we can't take a few for ourselves every now and then. And give it another shot. Give life another shot. But we have to get out of the quagmire, and it isn't easy. It's a journey. It's a journey out of the quagmire, and there are times when we step right back in it, and then we have to, pull ourselves back out again. So I don't want to make it sound as if it has been an easy journey. It hasn't, and even with forgiving my dad, I would forgive him, and I'd feel, and I would experience that. See, the other thing that I learned about forgiveness is that we really cannot forgive. It is not something we can do. It's insane to think that we can continue to condemn someone and forgive them at the same time. That doesn't work. So what it is, you have to relinquish your condemnation first, and then you will experience the freedom and the joy of forgiveness. So forgiveness isn't something we can do. It's the result of what we stop doing. When we stop condemning, we experience the freedom and the joy of forgiveness. So I would go through that with Dad, and then he'd turn around and do something else that I'd have to start all over again. It was really, but he knew, because when my mom died and I went back to the funeral and I left, the last words Dad said to me at that time was, well, have a nice life, because he figured I would never be back in his life again, because he knew how he had treated me and what he had done. Yeah. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't turn my back on him, because spiritually I believe we are one. And if we turn our back on anyone, then we can't be whole.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You see, we can't be whole. And so, to his surprise, I used to call home. Mom and Dad were from Maryland. Dad was from Pennsylvania, and they lived in Maryland. And so I would call home every week or two and talk with Mom and that sort of thing. So a week or so went by after Mom's funeral, and I called Dad. Now, my wife, Laura, and we've been together for 40 years. We just celebrated our 40th anniversary in March.
Congrats.
And
Congrats,
yes, I'm so blessed. But anyway, so she would be with me, and the phone calls were not easy in the beginning, and I'd be a wreck because he'd managed to say something that would, but, I kept reminding myself, nobody can make me feel anything.
Yeah.
Our feelings are our choices. So why would I choose to be upset? Why would I choose to be a victim of his words? Why would I choose to be subject to that power rather than keeping the power for myself? So it was that kind of exercise. And then ultimately I even invited Dad to come out and visit with us and stay with us, and I did that several times. And then Dad ended up getting either Alzheimer's, or I don't know what the actual diagnosis would be, and he was in a home. And now Mom and Dad were very, very socially well-known, and they contributed a lot to society. Dad was a very good mason and Shriner, and he would go to hospitals and visit people, and they were very good people. Nobody's all bad, so he just didn't know how to be a father. That was the problem. So anyway, he was sharing with me. I had gone to visit him in the home, and he was sharing with me how sad he was because he can't reach out and help other people now. People are coming to him. And I got the opportunity to share with him that, well, Dad, how did you feel when you visited other people and you made them laugh because you have a good sense of humor? How did you feel? And he said, well, I loved it. I wanted to do it. I felt like, I had a purpose. And I said, but Dad, you're just the other side of the same coin. You're giving other people now the opportunity to experience the joy of giving. And if you didn't have anybody to visit, you would never have had that experience. So now you're giving them the opportunity to give. And he ended up having a tear drop down his cheek, which I had never seen, and a smile that I will never forget.
Wow.
And that was the last time I saw my dad. So it was quite a journey, but I love the ending of that journey because I was free and so was he.
That's kind of a little bit, it reminds me of, that story you were talking about, the movie The Piano. And every time you saw it, the second time you saw it, you knew it was going to happen. So you had that feeling of, what was going to come down the line, even though, the first time you didn't know. But after all the years of what you went through with your father, I'm not saying that it was right, but the experience that you had at that moment, you couldn't have experienced that, with him at the home and him tearing without everything that came before it.
That's exactly right. And as far as the story of the piano, and you have read the book, and I really appreciate you taking the time to read the book before I came on. I really do appreciate that. The story of the piano for the listeners is that in that movie there is a very traumatic moment where a rather horrendous act occurs, and I remember the first time that I saw the movie, I got nauseated. I was totally upset. And then somebody talked me into seeing the movie again because they didn't want to go see it alone, and I fought not to go, but I went anyway, and it was good that I did, because when that moment came by again, I went, yes. And my friend is looking at me like I'm really not a well person. I am cheering this moment that is horrendous. But the thing is, I realized it was that moment that was the turning point in the lives of the people in the movie, and it ended up with a happy ending. And had something that traumatic not happened, it would not have spurred the ending that occurred. So, we cannot judge what is good or what is bad. We can't see anything as good or bad until we know the end of the story. If we know the end of the story, then we can assess how each thing, and spiritually, I believe all of us have a happy ending. So everything that happens in this realm is contributing toward that happy ending. If we can look at things that way from a distance, so to speak, then we can see that it is contributing to a happy ending somehow, some way. We may not see it in the middle of the event, but we certainly can trust if we believe that there is a spiritual life and that we all find the truth of ourselves. If we believe that, then we know that everything that happens to us contributes to that happy ending.
Yeah, we like to say that everything is as it appears to be, and everything is not as it appears to be. It depends on your perception.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yes. And in the book, I have the formula, P plus B equals E equals A, and that is perceptions plus beliefs equal emotion equal action. So all of our emotions and all of our actions are direct derivatives of our perceptions and beliefs. If we don't like how we're feeling or we don't like what we're doing, then we need to go to the cause, and we need to change our perceptions and our beliefs. And then our emotions and actions will automatically change. See, a lot of people, for instance, we've all known probably somebody with an anger issue, which was my dad. And if you try to control the anger, if you go directly to the emotion and you're trying to control that, your control will only be temporary. Ultimately, you'll explode because you haven't gone to the source of the anger in the first place. So we have to get to the fears that cause anger. All anger comes from fear. All prejudice comes from fear. All frustration comes from fear. There are basically only two emotions in my philosophy, and the two emotions are love and fear, and we get to choose. That's what I love about your show. You often bring up the fact we get to choose, and that's so, so vital to really absorb in every cell of our being. We get to choose every moment of every day.
I was happy and I was really excited about interviewing you because I don't really get to speak with a lot of people that know about the parable, but I'd love for you to share the story about Muddy Road since it was a good theme throughout your book.
Oh, yes. Muddy Road is wonderful. It's the story of two monks, Aikido and Tanza, and they're going down the road, and it's raining, and they run into this beautiful young lady in a kimono, and she can't get across the road because of the rain. Well, Tanzan picks the young lady up and crosses the road with her and puts her down on the other side so that she doesn't ruin her kimono or get mud all over everything. And then the two monks continue on, Tanzan and Aikido continue on throughout the day. And Aikido's not saying much at all about anything until they get to their destination in the evening, and then he just explodes and he says, why did you pick her up? You know that we monks are not supposed to deal with women, and especially attractive women and beautiful women, and you picked her up. And so then Tanzan says back to Aikido, well, I put her down on the side of the road. Are you still carrying her? Whoa. See? And so it really gets to the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. Are we making choices to help people even though that may go against the letter of the law? Tanzan did what was best. He did the loving thing as a monk, but then he didn't think about her anymore, and he just went on. Aikido is the one that carried her all day long, and with thoughts that were not pure and were... so it's what are we carrying? Are we still carrying things that we could have put down on the side of the road? And I just love that parable. We're carrying an awful lot of things sometimes.
It reminds me of, we have a good friend here in Atlanta, Yvonne. She's a global medium now. And when she was doing her, different sessions here, you have a circle of people and, you set the intention of, I want Buddha to come through, or I want my spirit guides to come through. And I'll never forget this woman, she's like, yeah, Buddha's going to come through. And it was her dad that came through. She was just so pissed because she was still carrying a lot of anger towards him.
Uh-huh. And that's beautiful. Yeah.
I'm not holding this anymore.
Yeah, let that go. And you know what? I have often said that my dad is my Buddha, because Buddha means teacher. And those that are pushing our buttons are our greatest teachers, because they're bringing to our attention that there's something we have not dealt with. So she had to deal. So her dad came through. I'm sorry. I think that's really funny. Her Buddha did come through.
That's funny.
Yeah. I want to go back to childhood, when you guys first, I think before you moved, you were living in a small house. And company came over, so they had to take your bedroom, and you had to go up in the attic with your brother. And you woke up in the middle of the night, and there was this strange man sitting on the bed. I'd love for you to share that story.
Yeah, I was only about 5 years old, and I had always been in my little bedroom downstairs, but when we got guests, they had to use that bedroom, so I had to go upstairs and sleep in the converted attic. Well, the roof is slanted and the lighting is different, and everything is just, it was strange. But I was on a little cot, and I was getting ready to go to sleep and everything, and all of a sudden I see this man at the end of the bed wearing a cap, and he was just moving back and forth, and I froze. I just absolutely froze, and I thought, oh my God, he's going to know I'm here. I can't breathe, and the more I didn't want to breathe, the harder I breathed, and I didn't want my tears. It was just a mess. And then all of a sudden, my big toe on my right foot jerked. Okay, that's all it took. It took the big toe on my right foot to jerk, and I said, oh, he knows I'm here now. So I popped out of that little cart, ran over and turned on the light, turned around, and there was the rocking chair with my brother's baseball cap on it. And every time a car or a truck went by, the rocking chair would move, and so it looked like there was somebody sitting at the end of my bed. And so I realized that, fear is just an illusion when you turn on the light. That was a major change in, I was only 5, so how much of a change could it be? But what it did teach me was to face my fears. Just head on. Don't run from them. Just look at them and deal with them. And they're not as scary as they may seem to be at first. I'll never forget that as long as it was my brother's baseball cap. Just the chair would move every time a car would go by, so it looked like some guy was sitting at the end of the bed with a cap on, rocking back and forth. Oh my, life is funny, isn't it?
Well, I wanted to bring it up because you're a psychologist, correct?
Yeah, my undergraduate degree is in psychology. My master's is in education, and my doctorate is in spiritual studies. Yeah.
Well, when you're, there is that school of thought of, Freudian, about your life experiences are all an amalgamation of your first 7 years of life.
And I think there's a lot of legitimacy there. The book, I'm Okay, You're Okay, and it seems as if Jim Self had read that. He talks about I'm Okay, You're Okay a lot. I don't know if he was referring to the book or not. But, yes, we start off with, early on, that book indicates, and psychology indicates, according to I'm Okay, You're Okay, which is a very popular book in the 60s and 70s and still has tremendous truth to it. I would recommend it for anybody. There are 4 basic postures that we adopt very early on based on our experiences. And the what I ended up with because of my dad was, I'm not okay, you're okay. See, he was he was the adult, he was okay, he must know everything, he must be right, I'm not okay. Because I'm getting hit, I'm getting beaten, so I must not be okay. So early on in life, you end up by how you're being treated and what your experiences are. I'm okay, you're okay, I'm not okay, you're okay, I'm okay, you're not okay, I'm not okay. So there are basically only four options there. And that is a foundation that until people explore it, you're going to be living that paradigm most of your life. So it is important to recognize, do you think you're not okay and everybody else is, or everybody else isn't? Criminals often believe they're okay and other people aren't, so they deserve whatever happens to them, the other people, and they're okay, so they can do whatever it is they want to do. So that paradigm stays with you until you take time to examine it carefully and hopefully come to the realization that everybody's okay.
And I wanted to bring that up because, you had that instance where you faced your fear at 5, but then in your teenage years, it took you forever to get your driver's license because you got lost one time at your new house. So I'd love for you to share, what happened in the teen years and then what happened, you were at a restaurant when you were 30, because I think it's all connected from what you're talking about, the foundation.
Yeah. This is another incident where my dad's behavior had a tremendous impact. My father was in the military, and we had been stationed in Germany for a couple of years, and we came back, and we lived with my aunt and uncle till the new home was built that we moved into. Well, we moved into an area where we were only the 6th house. So there were a lot of woods to explore, and it was near a stream, and there was all kinds of things. So it was the summertime. I was around 12. And I went out exploring, and I got lost. Now, that didn't scare me for some reason. I don't know why, but, I guess maybe the incident when I was 5 helped me deal with the fact that, I'm lost. I found my way home, but I was late for dinner. Now, that was a no-no. So I came in the back door, went to the kitchen sink, washed my hands. Now, Dad sat in one seat, and Mom sat to his left, and my brother Bobby sat to my mother's left, and then there was my chair, so I would be to the right of my dad sitting at the table. So nobody said anything. I came in the back door. Nobody said, "Oh, good, you're home. How, what?" Nothing. Everybody just sat there and quiet. So I washed my hands. I came over. I sat down. And I started to put some food on my plate, and my father did not lift his head. He kept his head down, and he just simply said, "Where were you?" And what did I say? Well, of course I said, "I was lost." So the next thing you know, he had batted me in my face. He had thrust me into the corner of the kitchen. The chair was on top of me, and then he sent me to my room without dinner. Because from his perspective, I had just back-talked him. I had just sassed him. I was being... Now, by 12, honey, I had learned, you do not back-talk your dad. Okay, but anyway, so I was sent to my room without dinner, and apparently I went to sleep. And basically, over the years, I had pushed that event way far into my subconscious, just pushed that out of the way. Well, when I was 16 and it was time for me to get my license, there was no way I was going to get my license. Now, I thought it was because of the films that we saw, and 2 cars are only going 30 miles an hour, and they bash into each other, and it's horrendous. And I thought, well, I'm not getting behind the wheel of a car at the end. But really, I found out later it was because of that incident at the table. So finally, when I was 18, my parents said, "We're not driving you anywhere, and you've got to work during the summer, so get your license." So I did. And then I had met a friend in college who lived in Virginia, and we were in Maryland, and so she gave me directions, and I was heading down to see her, and I got lost. Now, next thing you know, I'm biting my lip. It's bleeding. I've got my hands gripping to the point that, they're hurting. I'm crying like you wouldn't believe, and I was going 45 miles an hour in a 25-mile zone, and then I see this little, and hear this sound behind me that I have to pull over. There's a policeman pulling me over. Now, fortunately, at that time, policemen were really very good servants. Okay, now he came to my window. I'm sitting there sobbing. I've got the address in my hand. I'm saying I'm lost and I'm crying. He knew this was not a fake job by a woman trying to get out of getting a ticket. Okay, this was somebody who really needed to get off the highway or she was going to kill herself or somebody else. So he said, I know where that is. Follow me. So I followed him, and then he had me park someplace where I wasn't supposed to park, and he put a note on the car so that I would be facing the right direction to get out to go home. And so I guess what I was expecting at that time was some fist to come through the windshield of the car and bash me in the head for getting lost. Okay. So throughout the years, it was very difficult for me. If I ever got lost, it was traumatic. So I had this phobia. It developed into a phobia, which is an irrational fear. But this one evening when I was in my 30s, I was having dinner, and I was by myself. I was in a restaurant, and I was having steak and potatoes. And the only thing I can think of is that maybe steak and potatoes were Mom had fixed for dinner when I was 12, because all of a sudden that recollection came back to me out of the blue. I felt like an idiot. I'm sitting in the restaurant crying by myself. You feel kind of silly. So, but by having that recollection, what I realized is that, I was afraid of being punished for being lost. That's what my brain had twisted, that I wasn't being punished for sassing him back. I was you get lost, you get bashed in the face, and you get thrown in the corner. So by having that recollection, I was then able to face that fear. And so what did I do? I chose to have an outside sales job where I had to try to find places all the time and deal with the fact that I was going to get lost. But I wanted to face the fear and learn that I can pull over, I can get a map, I can ask somebody for help, I'm not going to get bashed in the face, I'm going to be okay. And I've worked on that, and I worked on that for years. It is amazing how one moment in time can be so insidious and just contaminate so many other moments of your life.
And today you hear a lot, it's thrown around the word triggered. And, I don't think people realize the magnitude of that, because you don't know where they're coming from and what is that actual trigger. What's going to set that person off, or what's that, that final straw that broke the camel's back, all the above. It's, you're running on a program that needs to be upgraded.
Yes. And I find that the spiritual path is where my peace lies. Yes, I use my mind and my training and all of that sort of thing, but to me it is recognizing again, I'm a child of God, and I have a lot of value, not just as a human being, but that as a child of God, we all have tremendous value. And if we lose anybody, then we're not whole. So we're all equally important in this concept of oneness. No one is more important than anyone else. We cannot have oneness if we leave one person out.
Yeah.
So now that the book is coming back out, are you going to hit the speaking circuit? You're going to go around the country and hopefully make a movie? What are your plans?
Well, right now I'm just doing a lot of radio interviews, and yes, I would be glad to. I want to do workshops. I want to do speaking engagements that involve other people. I have a workshop based on the formula, P plus B equals E equals A, for people to understand really how powerful that is, that we really do need to examine our perceptions and our beliefs to be able to determine, change our feelings and change our minds. I'm thinking if you have a minute, I can give an example of that that's pretty quick.
Go for it.
Okay, so let's say you guys and I are planning on having lunch at the mall, and I get to the mall a little early. And so I'm sitting there waiting for you, and way down at the other end of the hall, I see two guys coming toward me, and they look just like you. And so I stand up and say, "Hey, fellas, Hamza and David, here I am." And then I find out it's not you. Okay, so I feel like a total idiot, and I sit down and pretend like I'm texting somebody on my phone. Well, what has happened with that is I have perceived that it is you, and my perceptions are my truth. And then my beliefs about you guys are you're absolutely delightful. I can't wait to have lunch with you. And so I'm all excited. So my emotions are happy, joyful, and my actions are fueled by that emotion. So I stand up and I say hello. But if while I was sitting there, somebody else came down the hall of the mall, and it's somebody that I really didn't want to get involved with at the moment, because then I would probably have to invite them to lunch with you guys, and I really wouldn't want to do that at the time because I want it to myself. So I would slip into pennies, or something, and get out of the sight of that person. Now, again, my perception may be wrong, and it wasn't that person at all. And it isn't that I don't like them, it's that the timing is not right. So I get up and I go to penny. So again, our perceptions are our truths. And then what we believe about those perceptions create the emotion, which is the fuel that creates the action, or it doesn't create the action. It's the fuel for the action that is the result of the perceptions and the beliefs. So hopefully that explains it quickly, but we need to go back to what do we believe about what we think we're seeing, and change that.
Mm. It's interesting with that. That was a great example because, we all have different perceptions based off of the premise, of the conversation that this may have happened the first 7 years of our lives. That kind of goes into, and it's probably just me because I've seen a lot of movies recently, and the perception out there right now with the Me Too and all that, the patriarchal society is going away, and the man may be perceived that, these are perceptions out there that obviously needs to be looked at. But are they running on something that's what they were taught, and it's perpetuated through a generation or multiple generations?
Exactly. And one of the things that I would caution people who may be wanting to join the Me Too movement, there are some potential traps there. And they could get caught in the trap of judgment and condemnation, and lose sight of our individual freedom comes from forgiveness of ourselves and forgiveness of others. Now, that doesn't mean that the behavior isn't inappropriate or whatever, but like you were saying, men have been raised in an environment where that kind of behavior has, you elbow each other in the gym, like look what I got away with or whatever, and the behavior has not been condemned to this extent before. And so we have to be careful, in my opinion, with how we're handling this and the transition for young men that are growing up now and young women that are growing up now. We have to be careful what we're trying to teach them, because I wouldn't want a lot of young women to be anti-guy because of some of this movement. We have to be real careful with all of this.
Now, I'm a big movie fan, and so I like movies like Bourne Identity, the spy movies like James Bond, Bourne Identity.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so Right? And so there's an association with that. But now, over the past years, you've had Atomic Blonde. I'm biased, so I'm a big fan of Jennifer Lawrence. So I just saw Red Sparrow. And so you have these women taking these traditional male roles, but are they doing it just as a woman or just as a woman but still doing the male characteristics, or are they exploring the female side of it? So I agree with you in that there's some danger that you might replace that person, but you're still carrying on a lot of that same energy.
Yeah. We have to be. There are some pitfalls, but there's pitfalls with everything, and that's okay too. I truly believe that it all works out for the best for everyone ultimately. However many lifetimes it takes to get there.
For sure.
We're going to have a happy ending, and that's what keeps me going. I know, and we can have a happy life here knowing that we have a happy life, a happy ending anywhere spiritually. So.
Yeah, I agree. I know that I'm a big fan of Abraham, and they're always saying that you don't have to die to experience everything that you want. And, many people are going through, like you said, their programs or what have you, thinking that's all there is. And like you said, there can be a happy ending. It doesn't have to be an ending for you to be happy, though.
That's right. That's exactly right. And we don't have to wait till the end of the tunnel to see the light, because we are the light. And if we recognize that and we live that light each day, then we're living the joy that we can experience forever. Amen.
Wow, I don't know how that was like a good way to package the podcast.
Yeah, well said.
Do you have any other questions, David?
Well, I was going to say to Jeanne, affectionately, do you remember before you incarnated when you said, I want to learn about unconditional love?
No, but I obviously made that my master's thesis or something, or my doctoral thesis. But I do have a soul club, the Students of Unconditional Love Club, that I run every week, and we just love looking at spiritual solutions to earthly problems, and we laugh a lot and figure out, we scratch our heads and say, how did we get here, and what's the most loving way to move forward. And I just love that group. They're just wonderful people. And so I'm working on the idea of starting the Soul Club online so that people can experience the laughter and the joy and the love that we have in that group. So keep a lookout for that. Yeah, keep a lookout for Students of Unconditional Love. I'm sorry, I missed you.
Yeah, please keep us posted when that does come online. We'll spread the word.
Oh, I will.
Because I do want you to share that muscle that isn't used by many people, especially now, is the laughter muscle. So if you can give us one of your examples of how you guys are able to laugh, I think I'd love for you to share that.
How we're able to laugh at our...
Yeah, just your perception. Oh. Like there's some perception that...
Well, we get ourselves... See, I have to laugh at myself when I get in trouble with my computer because technology is beyond me. And so, I'll go to the class and say, okay, now this is what happened with the printer this week, and this is how I handled it, and I only stayed upset 2 minutes instead of 20. So we're getting there, and one day I will get to the point where I don't even get upset if the printer decides to do something other than what it's supposed to do. So we get comfortable in laughing at ourselves and what we're getting upset with, and we really study. I don't know if you're familiar with the book A Course in Miracles. That is that's the fundamental, the foundation of what we work off of. And so we look to see, what can we learn from Zen parables? What can we learn from A Course in Miracles? What can we learn, from parables from the Bible? But it's important that we first be honest with ourselves with where we have stepped off the path, and we're off the path anytime we're upset. We're either at peace or we're not at peace. And so if we're able to look at that and say, well, this is where I screwed up this week, but this is what I did, and I certainly got further along on the path this week than I would have several weeks ago. See, and so we want to celebrate as we become more aware, and we're being honest with ourselves, and we're working on not giving power to anything of this realm to interfere with the truth of who we are. So that's how we look at that. And we do silly things. I mean, really, people, we get ourselves into all kinds of messes. And so, if we don't have a sense of humor, we can be in trouble. We can be in trouble. We don't want everything to be so serious, but we do want to find legitimate solutions so that we can be at peace and joy most of the time, if not all of the time.
Yeah. It makes me think of one of my first classes with Horizon Center, where, I'm coming from the corporate background, the 30s, and they pull out these crayons and we're coloring, and I'm like,
I can see that. Okay. And what did you do?
It took a while, but I ultimately started doing it. It's funny because today you have, like, adult coloring groups. Like, you can do searches for, like, meetups. It's really interesting.
Yes, it's true. It's an art, really, when you think about it. But, yeah, out of context, when you're going to, a corporate meeting or something and everybody pulls out their crayons, there's a little bit of an oxymoron there somewhere. It's just strange. But so you caught on, though.
Kicking and screaming, for sure.
Oh, Lordy.
So for finding unconditional love a little piece at a time and more information about Dr. Jeanne Sanner, where can they find you? What's your website and social media?
Okay, website is Jeanne, that's spelled Jeanne, Sanner, S as in Sam, Anner. So it's Jeanne Sanner, all lowercase, no space, .love. That's my website.
Fantastic. And for the record, Jeanne, for the listeners, Jeanne and I spoke before this, and I said, is it Jeanne or Jean? She said, either one. So.
Yeah. I even call myself Jeanne or Jean sometimes. I'm not even consistent myself. So, do I have an identity crisis? I don't know.
Such a pleasure. Well, you have been in tune to another episode of Intrinsic Motivation from a Homie's Perspective. This is Hamza.
And I am David.
And Jeanne Sanner. It was a pleasure having you on.
You guys are a delight. You're an absolute delight. And thank you so much for inviting me on. And God bless you. You take care.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Stay in touch. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Listen to Intrinsic Motivation from a Homie's Perspective on RadioPublic. It's a free, easy-to-use app that helps listeners like you find and support shows like ours. When you listen to our show on RadioPublic, we receive direct financial support every time you hear an episode. Experience our show in RadioPublic today by listening to the show linked in our episode notes, and thank you for listening. Thanks again for checking out another episode of Intrinsic Motivation from a Homie's Perspective podcast. Please check us out on our website at intrinsicmotivation.life, where you can click on the Speak Pipe button and leave any suggestions for future podcasts that you'd like us to cover. Also, check us out on our social media sites. We have a YouTube channel, Facebook page, iTunes podcast, in addition to Stitcher and Google Play, all under Intrinsic Motivation from a Homie's Perspective. Check you out next time. Have a great day.